Okay, now I'm going to test sound. I've got to work the room here. First podium, which you can't see, but I would move the camera. Check 1, 2. This is podium mic 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Shut that off now. Now going around to all the rooms, all the microphones here. Desk mic 1, 2, 3. That was mic 6. Mic number 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Mic number 4. This is Ashley's mic. Mic number 3. Dr. Graham's mic. Mic number 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And lastly, mic number 1. Sibilance. Okay, sounds good. And I assume there's no logos or anything, not logos, but icons from the LCD screen of the camera. Doesn't look like it here, so I assume you're not seeing any of that there on the meat end of it. Hopefully not. Okay, great. Well, then I will keep the camera up. I'll mute the audio in here for now, and I'll stop back in the room. I'll keep all the mics hot in the room, but I'll just mute the audio here in the room. But I think we're good to go. Great, thank you. Thanks, I was gonna say that. Thank you.
All right, microphone.
Oh, you're try it.
It's, yeah, I have it. Can you hear me? Test 1, 2. No feedback.
It's better.
Yeah.
The
Electronic and heavy. That's enough of that. I think you just created a GIF. We'll see you next time with our theme of the night here.
Do you miss you when it's not on? WheelofFortune.com is all real all the time.
Want me to sit down there, Glenn? I'll sit in a little seat.
I got like these three seats. These guys got like.
Check 1, 2.
We got lots. Sorry, Glenn.
It's like being at home.
Yeah, I totally got mustard today. Mike's like, oh, I thought we were. Oh. How everybody goes.
Great, so we can call the order. Are we ready? All right, I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting and work session to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call this evening. We have Glenn Bobak, trustee, Jay Grover, trustee, Nicole Novak, trustee, Jude Kuhn, district clerk, Dr. Brian Graham, superintendent, Ashley Dreyer, president, Sue Marston, vice president. Robin McCreary is with us distance, with us via Google Meet or Zoom, trustee, and then Joy Lamarca as well is with us via the Google Meet or Zoom. So announcements, if everyone could silence their cell phones, and note that there is an emergency exit directly behind me and directly in front of me in case we need to leave unexpectedly. And if I could have an approval for the agenda, please, for tonight, January 25th, 2021. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carried 7-0. And if I could have a motion to approve the minutes from January 11th, please?
I'll motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carried 7-0. We did not have anyone sign up for the public comment session for agenda items only. So that brings us to personnel. If I could have a motion to approve PI 1 through PI 3, please.
I'll motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carried 7-0. Okay. And non-instructional personnel, if I could have a motion to approve PNI 1 and PNI 2, please.
I'll motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carried 7-0. That brings us to special education, pupil personnel services, with Cheryl Cardone.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hi.
I have two quick agenda items. We are still rolling with our CPSC and our CSD meetings virtually. So if I could have approval for those program recommendations, I would appreciate it.
Okay, if we could have a motion for services A and B, please.
I will make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
questions? Any abstentions? Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the public comment session for general items not included in this agenda. And we do not have anyone signed up for that this evening. So we will move ahead to the Board of Education work session, beginning with the hybrid 100% virtual model discussion. Did you want to start us off?
Sure.
Dr. Friend?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for either being here virtually or watching us on our live feed. I do have a few topics to bring up for a hybrid and or 100% remote model, and of course, be open to any conversation or discussion from the board. The first thing I want to talk about is today the New York State Education Department officials plan to ask the U.S. Department of Education to waive state testing and those requirements for elementary, middle, and high school, meaning ELA and math and science testing at the elementary and middle school level, as well as all of the regions. So Mr. Lester Young is the new chancellor of the Board of Regents, and he said, in light of the ongoing pandemic, he has determined that the spring 2021 state assessments cannot be safely, equitably, and fairly administered to students in schools across the state, and therefore he's going to be seeking waivers from the federal government to abandon those tests this year. That recommendation is up for public comment on the state website, and then he plans on sharing that with the board and making a decision as a Board of Regents the week of February 8th through 9th. So of course, we're going to wait further guidance from the regions, and then if action is taken on the recommendation, we'll need to see what the federal government and how they respond to their request to waive those tests, and we'll have to wait and see, the federal government's response. Are there any questions about the state testing?
Can you just repeat that again? February 8th and 9th was what was the?
That's when the Board of Regents would take action. Right now, there's a public comment portion of the recommendation. So probably if you went to the Board of Regents website, somebody could comment on that.
This morning, but thanks.
Sure. And that information will dovetail later in our workshop when we hear from John and Mike with respect to the 5-year strategic plan goals that they've been working on and how difficult, some of that data, without that data, how difficult some of those goals are. So also, you probably saw Friday that the governor announced that high-risk sports can begin their seasons February 1st. This is contingent, he said, on the support and approval of the local departments of health. Section 6 met with representatives from the 5 different Department of Healths today, and those representatives were from Erie, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Niagara, and Orleans counties. And later this afternoon, late this afternoon, the Erie County Department of Health released a comprehensive statement approving that these sports can begin. In addition, there will be some new requirements that our coaches, players, our athletic department will have to follow. And so John Roth and I received that memo this afternoon. It's quite lengthy, so he'll be reviewing that, giving me advice and counsel on that. Tomorrow, the Section 6 Executive Committee will reconvene to review these implications of winter sports in full force. And the section then will summarize their findings of what the Department of Health has said and provide counsel to the local superintendents. So if everything goes forward, the only winter sport that will not go is indoor track, because that had already been canceled. Bowling and swim are up and running right now, and then we would see competitive cheer, basketball, and wrestling have a condensed season starting in February. Are there any questions about that?
Brian, that's all good stuff. Did the governor mention anything about what might have changed from September till
Blessing,
now
Nicole.
that may have resulted in him making this determination? Because
I would have to go back to his statement. I don't have it at my fingertips.
yeah, more likely than not, no.
More likely than not, no. Yeah.
That's my gut.
I think everybody's happy.
Yeah,
But-
it's a good decision,
Right.
but we are not any different than where we were, in my opinion, in September. But nonetheless, there's been a change.
And you know, the Southern Politics Society, I think there's been a change, and we're still orange for some, you know, in
No, I
Erie
understand.
County. And no, but I mean, we're orange, but yet there's been relaxing going on with gyms and salons and restaurants now. So maybe there's some changes coming.
Is that still JV and varsity only, based on section 6?
Yeah, that determination hasn't been made yet. We're gonna wait and see what the section says.
Okay.
Certainly, you know, high school for sure, and then you would have to determine the others, you know, JV and or modified.
Okay. I know initially they had said no modified, so I don't know if that relaxed at all and that,
Oh,
that
yeah.
changed at all
Yeah,
from what was already determined initially. If things are becoming, you know, what it seemingly, it looks as though it's becoming more relaxed. I'm just wondering if anything changed on that end for sports for the kids as well, or if it's JV varsity only at this point.
sure. I think the modified decision, I could be wrong, I think that was a local decision.
Is it just boys swimming that will go on, or is it?
Sure, girls swimming, the NFL moved girls swimming to the spring. Yeah, so this would be boys right now. And the boys swimming, from what I understand, is going to be virtual, meaning that when we have a home meet and say we're playing contesting Niagara-Wheatfield, only Grand Island would be in our pool and Niagara-Wheatfield would be in their pool. And there would be some type of coordination of the times of the different events, and then winners would be determined.
Yeah, and I believe they'll have officials at each pool, correct? So they'll have
That would be my
referees.
understanding, yeah.
Yeah, they'll have referees at both our pool and whatever team we're going up against at their pool to, you know, certify and verify all the times as they come in.
We should have tried that yesterday during the football.
That's right. Well, I think there is a virtual Pro Bowl game next week, so you're on the right track.
It's on that.
So yes, good news for our athletes. You know, if you can imagine being a senior and being an athlete and having, you know, a primary sport, whether it's competitive cheer or basketball or wrestling, you know, this is excellent news for them to have some normalcy, you know, in the things that they absolutely love. Of course, there will be strict, you know, requirements that everybody will have to follow. So I do want to share a little bit more information. As the board is aware, due to an increase in positive cases, COVID-19 cases attributed to Youth Road Elementary, and due to issues in staffing at that building, we made the decision to pivot to 100% remote until February 1st. We do fully expect that the youth staffing issues will be resolved by the end of this month, and we should be able to resume our hybrid model at that time. Just wanted to make sure I mentioned that in case anybody had any questions. All right, so just some updates for you. As you know, we're doing rapid COVID-19 testing on a daily basis. Since January 4th, the district has administered 447 rapid tests to students, faculty, and staff. And we've had 3 of those tests return as positive in January, so that's less than 1%. The week-to-week net change, you've heard me talk about that, of positive COVID cases on all of Grand Island looks to be slightly reducing. For example, on December 11th, there was a week-to-week change of 135 more individuals who live on Grand Island who had tested positive in the week of December 11th. The following week, went from 135 to 109, and just before Christmas break, it was down to 86. Then it started low in January at 78, went up to 101, and as of January 11th was as high as 147. So it definitely peaked upward. And then this past Friday, we saw a slight decline to 105, which is a week-to-week change of 9%. So just a little bit of information for you as we watch the whole island and also what's happening in our schools. So we're hopeful to see that that is on a decline. You may also notice that in Erie County, we're seeing a decline in the overall positivity rate. Last Friday, the 7-day rolling average in Erie County was down to 5.6%. In other counties included in Western New York, such as Niagara County, they had a 9.5% positivity rate. Chautauqua had 9.2 and Cattaraugus a 6.2. And Allegheny was as low as Erie County at 5.6. So it appears as though that Erie County is slightly below also the New York State average as it stands now, which is just slightly under 6%. The most important thing, though, that I think we all agree on is that as a school district and as a governing body and as parents, we have to continuously promote the things that are so important in mitigating the risk of COVID spread. So that's social distancing, mask wearing, of course, monitoring our own health and wellness, and following proper hand hygiene during this pandemic. I would also suggest that, there's something that people are talking about. I don't know if it's a real thing. It feels like a real thing, COVID fatigue. You had a lot of excitement around the bills and the holidays and so forth. So in the same breath as we think about COVID fatigue, we also must adhere to these risk mitigation strategies, as they are really the only non-pharmaceutical intervention we have to combat this pandemic until a vaccine is more widely available. So just wanted to add that tonight.
Brian, with respect to vaccines, is there any, now that, as I understand it, teachers and other educational staff are at least, they're on the list to get the vaccine, do we have any tracking system in terms of how much of our staff are getting the vaccine and when, or I don't know if we can keep track of that, but do we have any understanding of how many of our staff might be have received the vaccine at this point in time?
Just anecdotal information, very, very small anecdotal information where, somebody might tell me that they've been vaccinated. I know of a few, 2 or 3 so far. There may be more. My appointment is this Friday at ECC South, but I fully expect it to be rescheduled or canceled. So
Mine was Monday and it was
My
canceled.
dad's Friday.
Fingers crossed.
Mine was tomorrow, mine was tomorrow and it's canceled.
Yeah.
CC South.
So we don't know and will not know, I guess,
right.
because we can't necessarily keep track of that.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It's, in terms of how many of our staff might be tested, it's like have received the vaccine and what.
Right. Good. Anything else on those areas?
Just a question about the group in terms of 1A, 1B. So the teachers fall in category 1B in terms of the vaccination. Would we have an idea of when the state had the adequate supply? Because as Jay mentioned, yours is canceled, correct? Your appointment, mine was canceled for tomorrow. Yours will probably be canceled for Friday. But will we have a general idea when all of 1B as a group, that category, would have had the opportunity and the availability of vaccines to be vaccinated? I do think the general public will be aware, like we would be aware of when that whole group, there was enough doses to have all of the teachers vaccinated.
It's a good question, Ashley. I don't know. I would suppose when they transition to 1C, that might be the telltale sign that they have given everybody in that cohort of 1B the opportunity.
Yeah, well, 1B, as I understand, also includes everybody over the age of 65. Okay,
Right.
Which means you have a very, very large group of people. In my case with older parents, I use my best efforts to get them appointments, and they've been successful with that. But But, you know, there's a lot of people who have had appointments canceled. Right, and what I've been seeing is that there's a large, very large group of folks who are over 65 who are included in 1B who will not get vaccinated. You know, at this point in time, Erie County, I don't think is even scheduling anybody until after February 1 on, right? And things that were scheduled before that have been canceled. So we're well, you know, behind the curve with getting people vaccinated.
Well, I think after the last meeting, didn't I send something to everybody that said, I can't remember where I got, but it said 4 months, right? So we're looking.
Yeah, we got a long ways to
in
go.
June, right?
We got a long
So.
Right.
I think I sent it, right?
Yeah, no, you didn't.
If we want to move on, at your seat today, you have a copy of a summary.
Can I just
Oh,
ask
sure.
one question? I mean, and it's out of pure hope, right? And to just reiterate, like, we're seeing some things loosen up, you know, and now they're talking sports. Where are they with education? Right? Like, and I know.
I agree.
And I know Bursine has been quoted, as long as there's a pandemic, she's not gonna look at that, right? And it's, I mean, I think it's awesome that our kids are gonna be able to compete, right? And there's gonna be strict guidelines for that, but when does education become a consideration? And then have you heard any more rumblings, rumors? I mean, we're talking about things starting to loosen up overall, and the one thing that seems to remain constant is that education isn't being talked about.
Well, thank you for that question. I don't have any
I know you
additional
don't have an answer, but I
information.
have to ask it.
Well, it goes to my point before, is that, you know, suddenly, for reasons that nothing's changed.
Correct.
If anything, there's higher positive rates now than in September,
Yes.
but our athletics are open. Okay, good stuff, but why?
So, but
There's no change in terms of the determination of when schools are reopening. Okay? And, or, to my knowledge, has there been any discussion with respect to that? So, you know, the governor makes these decisions that obviously are being challenged by certain people. I always ask myself, is that based upon something other than what?
right.
Okay? Why are sports reopening? Has there been any new evidence that suggests that they're safe? If there is, then great. Tell us what that is, and then let us make a determination. To the same point, maybe that also should suggest that schools should be reopened, right? I haven't heard anything about that, okay? There's no basis that I've seen, you know, I asked this earlier, why are sports reopening? I think it's a good idea, I like it, but it's been determined based upon evidence? I don't know.
Well, and they continue to say, you know, follow the science, it's all about science, right? So if they're using science to determine that our kids can play sports, where is the science to determine that we can educate our kids within the school building? And I know you don't have the answers, but these are questions that just, you know, need to be asked, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. And it truly, because nothing's really changed, it doesn't make sense that they're allowing sports. Did something happen? Did a group come together to make that happen? Like, it'd be great to know what initiated that, or, you know, what caused the decision, and is there something to be done or to be said, right? So, you know, if when your superintendents are meeting, if there's any rumblings, ideas, it's just getting more frustrating.
Did the group write a letter about sports, like the superintendent's group or any group that you are aware of? I know I asked Barry Entwistle, the president of the board of directors for NISBA, the New York State School Board Association, if there was a plan in place anywhere that he was aware of for reopening schools. Any kind of guidance that we could share with parents that, you know, we have plans for closing, we have plans for testing. Do we have any plans for reopening schools that, you know, once we hit this certain mark of, you know, even something such as, you know, we're moving on to 1C and all the 1B educators have been vaccinated and we're ready at that point, you know, we can do X, Y, or Z. He said he's not aware of any plan in place. And then I also have a meeting with Jeff, the attorney at NISBA, to talk about, a resolution that we brought up as well. But it's just, kind of mind-boggling that we have plans for everything, but how are we going to go about the process of reopening our schools? And that being said, I've made this point before that, I do want to see the adults safe. I want to see the teachers vaccinated. I hope that they all take advantage of being part of 1B and get that done, because I'm hoping that there will come a time where we have this plan, because I've been asking people in places that, have leadership roles, what is the plan? But I haven't been able to get an answer on that.
And it's probably rests with our governor.
I brought that up to I asked Barry if there were any that he was aware of or any other school boards in the state that we could use as a template to go
So
off
you have
of.
not
There's
done
no. No, he does not have any that are a template. Glenn, I know you said you might be interested in working on that, so I don't know if you still are. I'm going to talk to Jeff tomorrow, who is the attorney for NISBA, just to see if he is aware of any templates or also, advice that he could give in terms of how that should be structured. So I will email all of you what the results of that conversation are
Yeah, well,
as well.
you go back, I'm sure all of us have talked to people about this, current status of the schools. Many will say that having kids in school is, vital, right? That's where they need to be in order to provide their kids with the social activity and everything else they need to have a full, academic and social life, right? So many people are complaining that they're not going to school, not having that. And so, the thought there is we should try to move to create that opportunity. The other part that we're seeing, if that doesn't happen, is we need at least, stability in terms of what their model might be, right? Okay, folks are upset that arguably we're moving from hybrid to virtual and back and forth because of what's going on. And that's subject to, testing and circumstances, et cetera. But, we can only do so much about the hybrid virtual stuff, right? In terms of trying to open us up completely, we need to have some guidance.
And I
Some
also
thoughts.
think as time goes on, people are becoming more frustrated. This
Correct.
we closed in March. Nobody sees an end in sight, right?
Right.
So they're really looking for, if we're out till June, our kids missed a year and a half of school, right?
Right.
And parents are frustrated and everybody's just, I don't wanna say over it, just put over it, right? Like we need an end solution. It's hard and, people that work continually changing and making accommodations for their kids to be hybrid, and it's wearing on everybody, right? And I don't, we're all in the same boat, I'm not saying that, but I think that plays a lot into the buildup of more frustration, right?
Yes, I definitely communicated that parents would love a plan. They would love to know what the plan is with the state for guidance in terms of reopening guidelines or statistics or what has to happen in order for the schools to reopen. And, I hear we can comment on the website, the state website, in terms of the regions exams or state exams not happening and how we feel. And if those are canceled this year as well, my question would be, how can we as a district then assess where students are and determine, where they are in terms of meeting the standards that would have been present on those exams? So we'll have to, discuss and come up with a plan for, if those tests are canceled, how can we determine how our students are doing and what skills they have and what skills, they don't have because of this situation. That's something just to keep in the back of our minds as we see that, state exams are being canceled. I think that, you know, there is going to be a lot of inequity across the state in what kind of an education students have received. So then how do we make sure our students have the skills that they need in place to move on to the next level? And if they don't, how do we remediate those deficits? I think that's just a question we need to keep in the back of our minds in case we don't have those exams to refer to.
Well, we're also looking at ninth grade orientation, and there's 3 of us, I know at this table, that received it, right?
4 of us.
4 of us on
Yeah,
the same day.
5 of us, actually, not at the table,
Oh,
but
yeah.
Robin on Zoom.
Sorry, yeah,
So 5.
you know, I'm looking at that going, I don't even know, right? Like, and how do we, how does that go, right? You know, and of course that's gonna happen in every grade, but I'm just gonna bring that up as an example because I received it and I'm looking at it going, how do we even know what my son or the students in 8th grade should be doing when they get to high school, right? So that's every grade, but I mean, that's a pivotal change from middle school to high school. And again, no knock to the teachers, you know, we're doing our best, but that's a big jump to pick classes for your son who hasn't sat, or your child that hasn't sat in the classroom in a year and a half.
Yeah, if you consider this year's sophomores, I only say this because I have,
Same thing.
they had not taken the Regents exams last year. They potentially could have been part of that group that will opt out on the state tests, you know, and now potentially not taking Regents exams this year. You know, where does that lie as far as data and where they stand academically? So it's a challenge.
Well,
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well,
To make sure we're, you know.
Well, what I find, frustrating is that sports are being reopened because someone has decided that sports are so important, arguably, right? That should reopen it, but then nobody's thinking about the academic stuff and everybody else who's part of that group, right? We have a large group of people who are not getting any social interaction, right? And there's been no discussion of that, okay? And suddenly you say, let's have sports. I love sports, I mean, as you know, but it's not the only thing, right? There's so many other activities and social interactions actions that kids these days need. They're being, that they don't have.
Well, education is just the backbone to all that.
Correct.
Socialization.
Exactly.
Not,
Exactly.
Yeah.
The
Okay,
mental
so
stability.
if decisions are being made to open up sports, why isn't other stuff being considered?
And one quick point about the sports, are they wearing masks the whole time that they're playing? Like if they're soccer, do they have masks on the field? Because I mean, they're breathing all over each other if they're not. I mean, it's an airborne illness. So I would think, I know my daughter is doing travel volleyball, they have to wear masks the whole time they're playing, whether they're running the gym or, doing a scrimmage against another team, they have to wear masks 100% of the time that they're there. So you either can play with a mask or you can't play. So I'm just wondering how that's gonna work with our students, because this being a respiratory illness and an airborne illness, if you're playing sports, you're breathing heavy. And this being an airborne illness, that just, it's not that I want my daughter to play 2 sports for Grand Island. I want her to be able to play sports, but I just don't, I want to make sure they're safe while they're doing it. I don't know if we have a policy for that or if the Section 6 has a policy.
So the New York State Public High School Athletic Association has a document, the Department of Health has a document, and then Section 6 is reviewing that tomorrow, and then providing guidance to superintendents and school districts and their athletic directors. So the document I saw today was quite lengthy, and there were some changes to it, so there'll be some time to digest, but I didn't read each sport, and I don't know if some sports need masks and some don't. So I know that soccer, because my son plays, they were instructed to always have a mask. They were supposed to have a mask when they were playing, but there was also guidance that said that they couldn't tolerate the mask, they could pull the mask down. So that's how soccer went. Judo, that's fair, right? Yeah. But, with basketball and wrestling, there may be nuances or changes for all of those sports.
I mean, wrestling, they're face to face, so I would hope for wrestling, they have, but that's just my 2 cents. Anyway.
And no
I
for
digress.
swimming, I don't think.
Yeah, no, definitely not for swimming, right?
Nicole,
For the cost, my daughter
Okay,
the entire time. My other one does gymnastics. They wear it except when they're actually competing, which they're by themselves on the floor, but it's still attached. Hold them.
yeah.
And
That's
it's
good
like
to
that
know.
at their practices too.
And then the other question I had relating to the 100%, or the hybrid virtual model is the Wednesdays, since our last meeting, we implemented, we would have the Wednesday schedule that students would follow, and I was just wondering if you had heard any feedback or how that was going, and.
I've only heard positive feedback, so, has anybody on the board heard anything different?
I have not. I've heard positive things, and people are,
I did notice some middle school teachers have started to,
Live stream?
yes, thank you,
Great.
sorry.
No, that's good.
Live stream.
I think that's exciting. I think, it's germinating naturally, organically, and we have some outstanding teachers who are giving it a try and then communicating with others. So hopefully that'll grow and continue on in a very positive way.
It's more of a seamline, have to go between hybrid and virtual if they're already getting
Yeah.
those virtual lessons at home on the days. Next time, yeah,
Yes.
which I like. That's good. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
like a schedule.
And then with one side, did anyone talk about clubs like, I know there's like chess club that used to meet after school and those type of activities coming back?
So as soon as we have some of this guidance, then we want to provide equity above and beyond just sports. So we just have to make sure that we have good procedures and protocols in place. I know that just before November 23rd, we had a group of people who were thinking about doing like a virtual musicale or some type of showcase. So I know that was in play. They were coming up with some ideas, and then we shifted, to everybody being home. So those are conversations that our club sponsors would more than likely have with their principals and do everything they can to bring back some of that normalcy.
Last question.
Brian, why would it need to be virtual if athletes can be together? Why couldn't
Sure.
other kids be together in the same
Yeah.
type of situation? That's my.
Yeah, let me clarify. I didn't
It's a
say,
proper question.
let me clarify. I didn't say that the children would be virtual. So it would be once the performance is probably recorded, the parents would see it virtually. Yeah. Now, again, I'm not talking about a full-fledged musical on stage, probably soloists or quartets or, singing and doing different things. So that was the plan in November, I don't know if anything has been changed, but yeah, packing the auditorium wouldn't be allowed, at this time with, audience.
How will this affect our staffing for cleaning and cleaning the school? Because I know right now we kind of shifted them so we can clean when no one's here, but if they're doing basketball, wrestling, swimming, they're gonna be here in the building later in the day where traditionally we were saving that time to really clean it.
Yeah, we would really want it to be wrapped up earlier than later because we do have a second shift, but we don't have a third shift. So we, kind of still in flux, it just came out, about sports.
Would you have to hire more or add hours to some?
Right.
Or
Yeah, so we would be meeting soon about the cleaning of the pool and the cleaning of the gymnasium and other areas that might involve the wrestling, for example. But yeah, it would impact the second shift for sure. Well, very good questions. Okay. So at your seat, you have a summary of the Sidway survey that we sent out. You may recall that this was a survey asking for parents from Sidway to give us their opinion regarding the possibility of having their child or children attend Sidway for a half day on Wednesdays. The model that we proposed in the survey was A to L coming in the morning and M to Z in the afternoon. So as you're looking at the summary, you'll see that there were 352 responses that were received. Of the 352 responses, 294 of those responses were yes, that they would be interested in having their child attend Sidway for the half days.
Brian, just real quick, that 352, can you just, out of how many? Out of how many possible responses?
Sure, we have slightly over 400.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. So it's
So it was a lot, so I guess the point I was trying to
a good response.
reiterate is that it was a great response.
Good
It was
response.
a good sample number.
So you'll see 294 yeses, 58 nos. I do want to add, and you'll see in your notes, of the no responses, 12 of them were parents who currently have their children in 100% remote. And interestingly, I don't know if this was a computer glitch for some of the participants, but there were 13 duplicate no's, I guess. So let's say parent A said no, then you'll see in the no section highlighted, some of the no's, are the same responses over and over again. So ultimately, we would, we could do some subtraction from that 58 too, based on the duplicates. So before I go into the concerns that we have to solve, you have all of the names of the students and parents who responded to the survey, their cohort, and the first section of your packet are the no's, and then the second section of the packet are the yeses. So you'll see what some of the concerns were from those who said no, and then you also see some of the positive feedback that we received from parents who said yes. So you can take this home and read those comments. We can talk about them again. What we have to do as an organization is respond to some of the concerns. One of the concerns, and Nicole, you just kind of touched on it, is being able to clean between the morning cohort and the afternoon cohort. So I'll be meeting with Mr. Rosler to see what kind of plan that we can put in place to make sure that student desks and workstations are cleaned before the next cohort comes in. Also, there was a significant scheduling concern for students who learn English as a second language, who have IEP services or related services through IEPs or RTI responding to intervention services that are currently scheduled. So there's going to be some scheduling puzzles that we'll have to work on to make sure that we're able to provide those services with this change. Because right now, those services are being provided on Wednesdays in a different way. And I guess, I would say to the board, if we're successful in resolving those issues, we would be targeting February 24th after our break to add these half days to the Sidway calendar.
Great, this is great. And it would be still the same, like half day, the A through L in the morning, and the half day, the M through D in the afternoon.
And we would, we would look at anything, even reversing it if it made things easier for families and for school scheduling, but right now it would be A to L in the morning, M to Z in the afternoon. Jay?
No, I was just going to comment that I did see some people make a comment about the full Wednesday every other, but we would not go that way. We would go with the morning and afternoon.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Great. Well, please feel free to review, those comments, and you'll see right away, some of the issues that we have to iron out before we activate this. And again, just, I mentioned this to the board before, there is an economic cost to it, an increase in the monies that our transportation department would need to, work and have those hours for working on Wednesdays. I think we figured out 19 weeks was about $40,000 increase in wages, but it would be less if we started after the break.
I do too. Do you feel as though we may need to hire more cleaners? Should we expect that?
It's possible. I'll be meeting with Jim soon, and I know he's in consultation with custodian Kevin at Sidway. We just want to make sure we're thinking of everything, and because the kids aren't eating lunch, they won't be using the cafeteria, so that we just got to make sure that we're thinking a little bit differently with respect to what we actually have to clean. So this might take a little bit.
I mean, if we're just talking about, if we're just talking about that certain time period, we may be able to, is there a possibility we could adjust some of the other cleaners' schedules at different buildings to help out during that time? I mean, with them just being in there half a day, that, maybe the computer labs won't be being used, I mean, Every other desk is only gonna be used, it's not gonna be a full clean either, so maybe we could utilize some of the staff we have too. And I'm sure you guys will work
Yeah,
it.
we'll definitely work it out. There are contractual,
Yep.
language that we have to follow when we change people's, work hours. So there's a lot to consider, but I think that's a good
I'm
point.
not saying at the same hours, just maybe switch buildings for, that's all.
This probably goes without saying, but, Brian, we're suggesting making this change February 24th,
Yes.
right? Which will lead me to the presumption that there is little expectation by our school district that we're gonna have any, other changes between February and June, like opening up schools completely.
So I think your question is, are you asking me if I would think we would be opening up schools between now and June? We wouldn't be able to do that if we are expected to follow the 6 feet of social distancing guideline.
So the thought is that it's more likely than not that we're gonna continue to be in the current situation at least through June.
Yeah, unless something changes with 6 feet of social distancing.
Okay. I knew the answer.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I know that can be very frustrating for many of our families in the community, or even grandparents and others, right? But we have to follow that, and some would argue that is one of the reasons why you don't see student to student or student to adult transmission of COVID, because we're following 6 feet of social distancing. So some might argue that is one reason why transmission rates are so low. And as you see, we all see the district has spent a significant amount of resources in keeping people safe with air purifiers and plastic barriers and PPE and social distancing as well.
You have done an excellent job keeping people safe, and Brian, you and the staff, Jim Rosler, his staff, in terms of getting everything ready, these plastic barriers, putting 12,000 pieces together, and just everything from the air filters in every classroom to the plastic barriers. You really have done an outstanding job with thinking about safety and keeping kids safe and the adults safe, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think, we all wish that we were open 100%. I think that everybody has the same hope and wants the same thing.
Good. So tonight, as part of our workshop too, we've invited Mr. Fitzpatrick and Mr. Lauria to share with the board updates related to their our 5-year strategic plan. Mr. Fitzpatrick, if it would be okay if you went first, it would be great to hear from you, and then we'll transition from you to Mr. Lauria.
Thank you. I'm going to present my screen. Just give me a few seconds, please. Dr. Graham, can you tell me if you can see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So, members of the Board of Education, we met again, or back in October, to give you where our strategic plan was before the pandemic. And if I can just focus your attention, I went through this slide with you back in October, and the item that's highlighted here in green, that is what's in our strategic plan that we are currently moving forward with. That was already in the old plan, I should say, prior to the pandemic. And that's science curriculum is developing their curriculum to meet the NISLA standards, and we are still ahead of schedule in doing that. The pandemic hits in 2020, March of 2020, and we immediately switched our strategic plan to support instructional technology for our teachers. We looked for additional professional development through BOCES. And then again, in planning the Professional Development Day on November 3rd, we tried to front load that with as much instructional technology development as we could. And then in late October, due to the parent survey and a lot of feedback from our parents in general. We had to adjust the workload for our students. We were moving forward at a very fast pace back in October, trying to meet as many standards as we possibly could. However, given the current environment, we're in a hybrid situation. That was difficult for many of our students and their families. So we had to lessen the workload for our students. So here's our strategic plan as it is right now. We are considered, at least in the middle school, I call it the pandemic adjustment. So still what's highly important in item number 1 here is that we are providing as much instructional technology support as we possibly can. And it's been, you know, it's been hard to find, but we are trying to, as much as we can, through BOCES and back in the Professional Development Day on November 3rd. And we are certainly fortunate to have Mrs. Melanie Kitchen, who is a district resident and a highly, highly regarded staff developer for BOCES, to help us with that day. So we were certainly grateful for her. And then we are moving math forward. One of the initiatives that Dr. Graham had for the district in math, we are working with Kim Ludit at BOCES at this time. In fact, this Wednesday is our next professional development day for our math teachers in the middle school. And back in October, she provided instructional technology training in a computer-based program called Nearpod. The teachers with her, working with them, they created a common formative assessment for all grade levels in math. And then this Wednesday, they've already given that assessment, I believe either last week or the week before. And they're going to complete a data analysis this coming Wednesday with Kim Ludit, all of the math teachers in the middle school. Going to item number 3 over here on the right-hand side, we had scheduled prior to the pandemic to start the iReady assessments, which replaced STAR. And I know, Mrs. Dreher, you were talking about assessing where our kids are at. Believe us, that has certainly been on our mind. Although we are inching forward with iReady in a hybrid model, we did test all of our students hybrid only, the kids who were in person, back on November 20th, and then math on December 20th, we tested all of our students in both hybrid and virtual, and got some very interesting results. The iReady program is much more, I'll say, valuable than STAR. The reports that you can get from iReady, I would say, are much more valid than STAR. However, at the same time, it's most important to have your kids sitting in front of you and taking that exam, or that online assessment. So here's our readjustments moving forward. We want to continue, where possible, to support the instructional technology component for all of our teachers. And, when we're able to, in a very valid way, we need to transition back to the original plan. We had built-in data analysis points, checkpoints along the way, where we could formatively assess our students, either through final exams that we would have created at the end of the year based on power standards. And this pandemic has also helped us really learn some new things that we could, with instructional technology, take care of with our students that we may not have known before. So we're looking to find the places where we can continue to grow and how we can integrate more technology after we're able to return full-time in person. So that's the status of the middle school right now. Does anyone have any questions?
For the iReady data, would we be able to see some basic data on that as far as grade level, like percentage of students on, at, above or below grade level, or does it not present that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, John, that's probably something we could do in the future, is share with the board some of the, take out the student identified information, but share the aggregate information, the data that you're receiving from iReady that speaks to on grade level or
Sure.
low level.
So I can share with you right now, first of all, I have to say that we only gave the iReady assessment in November. That was on the 18th and 19th, I believe, right before we went on the pause, to the students that were in person. And of those students in person, we had 50% in November, either on grade level, and that was across the whole school, or above. Let me say that again. We had 50% that were on grade level, and then it was like almost the perfect bell curve. You had there were students who were above grade level, and then you had a group of students who were below grade level. And we were trying to identify, did we have the right students in our AIS program in that, in those cohorts that were not on grade level. And some of those students had IEPs and some of those students didn't. But for the most part, at that point in November, we did have, of the kids that were in school, were in our academic intervention program, of the kids that were in school. You know, for the virtual students, especially those who had been 100% virtual from the start of the year, at that point we were not sure, you know, at where they were assessed at in the iReady for ELA. The reason we didn't test them in ELA it was because it was the first time we're using the program. We weren't quite sure what the validity of the test would be and how much support the student would need at home to complete the assessment, like just logging on and getting through the kinks of the assessment. But it was successful in ELA, so that we did it with everybody in math, and it was about the same in math as far as you know, numbers or data is concerned. So
for the board, iReady is given K-8. So this is the first time, you know, in a long time that we'll be able to look at that data, look at ELA and math, and compare and contrast growth from the fall to the end of the year. And Ashley, I think that goes to your question earlier. This will be one tool, just one piece of data that we'll have. Of course, John mentioned common formative assessments that the teachers are creating. Also, end of the year assessments that teachers create. Will be other sources of data that we'll have to see how children are on par with their education.
So if I can speak just a little bit more to the iReady assessment, it's not just a one and done test or assessment. We're expected to give it again. You're expected to really give it 3 times throughout the year, but this has been an evolving year, of course. So we will give it most likely a little bit, I would say, well, if the state exams are canceled, that will change how we will assess our kids with iReady in the springtime. Our concern was if we were moving forward with the state assessments, hitting them with another online assessment already in a pandemic where students are struggling virtually might not have been, we have to also balance the well-being and mental health of our students too. So, but if the New York State assessments are canceled, that certainly changes our how we look at the iReady assessment moving forward, which I believe will give us more accurate information than a New York State assessment, which is a one-time shot, almost like a temperature reading. Probably not the best metaphor to use right now during the pandemic, but you know, it's you can't hold the state assessment, and a lot of data analysis people will tell you this. That's a one-time shot, a snapshot of a kid, and we're making decisions based on that one time alone. And you know, the iReady, which is supposed to be given over 3 times throughout the year, is going to give you a lot better information about your child and their progress.
So is that considered a standardized test, John? Is it considered standardized in terms of this is what all 8th graders should know, or what all 7th graders should know, or 6th grade? So it's
about the assessment. It's a good question. Is it only tests students as far as they can achieve? So, like if there's a higher level question that they don't do well on, it bumps them back to an area where they can perform at a standard level and where they can find success. So you know exactly where they are and what they can and can't do.
okay, and it measures their growth then over time.
Yeah.
So John, it's measuring their growth, not necessarily where they meet a standard.
That's right. That's right. But you weigh that against what the New York State standards are. iReady is, it's a national type program that is, it's fit to the state standards that you operate in.
Right, so John, when you say we're on a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
Right? Does that mean that we have a bell curve of progress or a bell curve of where they meet a standard?
It's just, yeah, it's a grade level where they meet at a grade level. For example, in ELA, it's reading comprehension, where they are at their specific grade level, and you can then take out or meet out the New York State standards from that.
So the question I ask is that when you say that the test resulted in our students meeting the bell curve, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what you said. Does that mean that our average student is an average student, or is that?
I'll be honest, I was surprised to see at the end of the first marking period that 50% of all students in the school, regardless of the grade level, were on grade level at that time, according to the standards in iReady. And that was based on ending a school year relatively like in March, and then having the full fourth quarter the year before, right? That was, the instruction that we got from the New York State Education Department was no harm, if you remember that phrase. So I was surprised that most of our students in the school, or at least half of them, I should say, were on grade level at the end of the first marking period.
Well, I find that actually, I think we should strive to be better than on grade level myself, but that's just because I think our students should be better than on grade level students.
Oh, of course. Of course. But given the gap that they had and not knowing, what was going to happen, I was encouraged by that. And so I'm anxious to see how we test again a little bit in the springtime, a little bit later in spring.
Yeah, maybe actually that could be for workshops we have in the spring, but maybe rounds of that data could be included in that workshop.
Yes. That is a good idea.
John Jay was saying that in a future board meeting, whether it's a workshop or board meeting, we may want to revisit this in the spring to look and compare and contrast the results from November to a second data point or third data point.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. And again, we're doing this in all of our buildings, K-8. So we're going to really begin having rich data and conversations around the standards and around the students taking these.
The one thing to remember too is, as we move forward looking at data, data is data, but it's important to know that when you meet data, what are we going to do with that data in terms of, what support are we going to put in place in terms of strategies to mitigate and help the students who need the support. So it's just, that's a huge question that we all together have to work on. And I find this with myself being a secondary educator, we can look at the data all day long, but then we need to provide the support, moving forward and helping those kids get to where they need to be.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
If it's okay with the board, we'll transition to Mr. Loria.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to have Mrs. Surdike present for us. So she's going to load this, and as soon as she has the presentation up, we will get started. Just so you know, obviously, I'm going to continue kind of where John started. Our strategic plan has been very unique in terms. Let me just wait till this comes up. I'll get started anyway. So our strategic plan has always been very quantitative. As many of you guys know, I'm a pretty quantitative person. I always will present our presentations in terms of data from state assessments, in terms of passing rates, regents rates, attendance data. And this has been kind of a new world for me this year, especially with everything in our strategic plan in terms of quantitative goals based primarily on regents assessments for passing, for mastery, for chronic absenteeism and things like that. So this year's kind of left us in a very unique situation in which we kind of are at a conundrum for many of our assessments, as you know, and I think that you guys alluded to this earlier in the workshop in terms of what do we do to measure students at this point in such a crazy year. So our success really has primarily been measured through our benchmark assessments, but keeping that in mind, our quarterly assessments that many of our departments have created are all very different. They're all very unique. And as we move into our second half of the year, I've found that many of our departments are actually redesigning many of their CFAs, common formative assessments. Unlike the middle school, we don't have a highly streamlined software program that measures success for all of our specific areas.
Sorry, I'm trying to get it to share and it's not going. I'll try it again.
Many of the specific areas are very, very different in terms of that. Like, as I said, there's not a software program that does benchmark assessments for high schools and anywhere. And we're very far behind the middle school and the elementary schools in terms of computer-based assessments that our district has been working on at the K-8 level for the past several years. They never really quite made it to the high school. So a lot of our teachers and departments are struggling this year with the aspect of the fact that our current assessments don't necessarily align with this virtual hybrid. I guess you can call it a hybrid of both worlds crossing together in terms of teachers trying to assess. So as we move forward into our program, Karen, I'm going to ask you just to jump to those two slides with the department goals. A lot of our departments and a lot of our benchmarks, as I said, and goals are set on those Regents targets. Well, we don't have Regents exams, and as June came and went, we realized that that data is not going to be accessible to us. So I don't want everyone to think that those targets don't exist anymore, but a lot of what we've had to focus on in the last year is the other non-quantitative goals and the processes and the routines that are established in order to meet those targets. And a lot of our departments have done a phenomenal job of making sure that all of what they've aspired to do in the last several years in terms of curricular teams, they've continued on path with. So like, I'm just going to go through some of our departments and give you some examples. In terms of our English department, a lot of what they have focused on is improving reading and writing in terms of comprehension and reading a lot of different genres, including the nonfiction and the fiction tests, and infusing historic literature that's relevant today into those texts. This has been a phenomenal year for that, with all of the political things going on in the world in terms of the historical unprecedented changes that have gone on. And so it's really been great to see in their lessons that they're infusing many of this historical information, and they're using some very new strategies for both reading and writing. I've observed a lesson recently in which we incorporated a QAR strategy, a soapstone strategy for the AP students at the level. And a lot of those are annotation strategies so that students are following and learning how to read more closely so that they can pick out and not only write about the detail and the examples given within text, but also speak to it. And some of the most amazing discussions have come about through this virtual setting. And again, many of our English teachers are now starting to get into that live streaming mode, but like our math departments. And it's good to see them that with the new Google breakout rooms, that they can actually break into small groups and the teacher can pop into each of those for not only leading those discussions, but also for conferencing with students on their work. Our algebra, our geometry, and our algebra 2 represent our math department. Those three teams have all been focusing some similar goals, strategies that students are now not only finding the math, but also explaining those solutions in writing. Again, John mentioned that those teams are working with Kim Ludit. Last year, they worked with an organization called Apex Math Strategies. And so the technology that's been infused this year has has always John mentioned Nearpod, and I believe Mrs. Ernst, one of our teachers, presented earlier this year on Nearpod. The math version of Nearpod that our department uses is Desmos, and that is a very similar instructional tool. They also use MathBits, IXL. The geometry teachers are using Geometers, Sketchpad, and GeoGebra, which are also technology that have made them very functional in this new 21st century remote world. So our math goals haven't really changed. It's just the implementation and finding the tools to have kind of been fast-tracked actually in the last couple of years. So global and U.S. history Regents exams have already been going through the shift. So the last year that the Regents exam was canceled was going to be the first year that the U.S. history transitioned to the new frameworks exam, and global already transitioned to that exam. So in those two departments, they had already been working on those new frameworks curriculum. They have stressed the importance of their writing skills. The teachers mentioned that what they see as more different is not necessarily, for example, I observed a lesson this week on global history, and the teacher mentioned it's not all about the causes for a world war. It's the process and the situational events that occurred that led to it. So through primary and secondary source documents, our students will discover what was going on in that time, look at it from point of view, look at it from the different civic ideas and practices that are mentioned in the new frameworks curriculum. So our music department, they've been really focused on rhythmic reading. That hasn't really changed too much. I know that they have a tool in which they measure key signatures and scale performance. They're working on sight reading with our students and trying to get students to perform correctly in all of the 15 key signatures on those performances. So just to highlight from some of those departments, we're going to move on to the next page, which takes into account first our science department. They are not yet, John mentioned his science department is in kind of the process of transitioning. Our science department is really waiting for more guidance on how the assessments are going to change with the next generation science standards. I will say it's a lot like social studies has gone in that instead of looking at memorization or rote facts, our science process is what is really being implemented. So a lot of students will be looking at data tables and graphs and pictures and diagrams, maybe even a science editorial cartoon. And our science teachers are trying to incorporate those in their unit lesson plans where, for example, they might have 5 different pictures, including a data table, an editorial, a graph, and they will look at all of that data and try to make sense of it and try to make predictions and make theses out of that statement. So that's the direction that that John, our middle school, has mentioned that they're going. We're also going that direction. Again, it's all about experiencing science, not necessarily just memorizing science. It's about doing the work, doing the labs, not just learning about it. Our LOT department's focused on expanding specifically their subjective indicative verb tenses. They have learned that those are 2 areas where students significantly struggle, and they've made it their focus in the last year or 2, and that has not changed in their curriculum. Our technology department has had to make some major adjustments, as you can imagine, with all of the social distancing requirements. A lot of the projects that they've moved to have been smaller scale, and a lot of them have been making kits for our students to take home and work on these in their own homes, and then they will deliver them once they are complete. So, instead of designing like the bridges that they used to do and doing the large scale weight projects in the classroom, they're doing these on a smaller scale within their classroom, within their own homes in many cases. And then our business department, you're very familiar with our shift to the NAF Academy this year. The one struggle has been similar to the other areas, in that the NOCD exams is a kind of a assessment that we are using at the end of our courses to measure their success in their specific CDOS programming. It's also one of those tools that we use to get those ratings for our CCCR report from the state for accountability. And overall, I would say that they've struggled this year trying to maintain the internships that typically would be those authentic learning experiences for kids. And they've had to come up with some creative solutions. And I know that this summer they're really trying to implement that as a summer program for many of our kids so they don't miss out on what experiences they would have normally had during this past year. So that's kind of a summary of all the departments. I know I didn't mention phys ed and health. I know they have also had to adjust significantly. Cheryl Cardone earlier in the year spoke to many of our other departments, our guidance department, our special ed department. And all I want to mention is that, every year I come in and talk about all the accountability measures that we are as a high school rated on. And the ones that you see in front of you in green, those are the ones that are still being measured this current year and what seems like it will be this current year. Our graduation rate, our CCCR report, which I just mentioned, that's how many of our students leave our high school that are better, prepared for college. And many of those are students with the advanced regents. Many of those are students who are in our BOCES programs, and many of them are in our business and tech programs as well. And then the final measure, which I think is the scary one for this year with every school doing things a little different with absenteeism, is the chronic absenteeism report. So I just want to leave you with, before I ask if you have any questions, our graduation rate status. Our graduation rates were just released. If you can move forward one more. Our graduation rates that were just released last week, actually, on our state report card were made public. It's actually, I want to refresh so everyone's clear that this would be the second last column you're looking at, the 2018 to 2019 graduating class. Everything that's uploaded to the state is a year back. So this was one of the years that we brought up last year as being a little bit lower than it had in the past. So you're going to see that reflected in the report card this year. If you go to the state site and look up the data, we've already looked at our graduation rates for this past class, or 2020 class, which, as you can imagine, in most across the state were a little bit higher than they normally were. But I will say that this does speak to any of our students who have dropped out along the way. So we did do very well. But what was not expected was how high our advanced regents rate was. And some people may say, well, everyone got, great grades on regents exams because they did the exemption last year. Well, the reality is that these are the students who really took those regents exams their junior year. So that class that graduated did a very good job. And I think it shows that we are moving in the right direction in terms of our students taking higher level classes and more of our students college and career ready moving forward.
Mike, just for people that may not know what the advanced distinction is, that's the 85% or higher on all of the regents exams. And you have a certain math course, correct? That you.
It's actually based on taking more regents exams. So those students with that advanced distinction have taken all three of the regents math exams, at least 2 science exams, and then the English, the U.S. history, and the global. So they are taking 2 extra science exams and 1 extra math exam. So in some cases, it's 2 extra science math exams. So these are the kids who are getting, taking Algebra 2, passing, taking, in most cases, earth science and passing, and in many cases, the chemistry and the physics as well. And they are typically some of our higher achieving students. But it has been my goal and our goal as a team since we've been here to get that number up, because it had never been above 50% before. And we made some major programming changes through the years and really, push differentiating instruction and many different methods in teaching our teachers that these are students who can be successful at that level if we can differentiate our curriculum appropriately, and if we can give them the tools that they need to be successful. And it's really nice to see that those expectations are being met by many, many more of our students as we move forward.
That really is outstanding. So great job to the high school. Kudos to everyone who worked to get that number up to 71%. Is that so? In addition to the extra math exam and the 2 sciences, is there a certain percentage, like an 85 or higher, still that is required for that, or is that?
It doesn't require the 85 or higher. There are some distinctions on the diploma that need the 85 or higher. A lot of those are the honors or the with honors. And you can get an advanced regents diploma with honors if you get above an 85 on all of the exams. And we did have a large number of students who did that last year, or 2 years ago, actually, with the graduates from last year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to say, just to finish this, and then I'll answer any questions you might have, is just to say that I think our teachers are rebuilding this year. Everything was so unexpected, and I know that you understand that concept of building the plane while it's flying, but I do see that a lot of our common formative assessments are going to have to change. I do know that many of them are rewriting a lot of those to be more writing intensive, not necessarily. And a lot of it's because of the security of testing in the remote world and trying to lean away from more, simple multiple choice and really show that kids demonstrate their understanding in different ways so that, so that we are being fair in the two world system, in the remote system, and the hybrid system.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Loria? Okay, thank you, Mr. Loria. And Mrs. Wright.
Thank you.
That's all that we had scheduled for tonight.
Great. All right, any more questions on any of the topics? Okay, if I could have a motion to adjourn the Board of Education meeting work session at 8:50 p.m.
I will motion.
Okay. Sue second. All in favor? Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carried, 7-0. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Like, Marco, we're on